Hi guys, I'm Calder from Calder Ceramics and welcome back to another Christmas themed video. In today's video I will be showing you how to make Christmas trees by hand building. I've already made a video on how to throw them on the wheel, so if you're more so into throwing, definitely check out that video. I will link it down below. But in this video I will be showing you how to hand build them. It's actually quite easy, so I think everyone can do it, and I'll try to keep it short. So without any further ado, let's just get started with making the trees. I start off with making a cone out of a piece of paper. I will be using this as a mold to make the tree around. When I have the shape that I want, I use some tape so that it stays in this shape. And then I cut some paper off the bottom to make it straight and stand like a tree. Then I start rolling out some clay. To prevent it from getting stuck to the wood, I turn it around every now and then. But you could also use a newspaper or a piece of fabric to prevent it from getting stuck. I'm trying to make the clay in a round shape because this will be handy for cutting it out later. When the clay is nice and thin, I start cutting it with a little knife. And as you can see, I'm cutting it into a spiral. This makes it very easy to make a long strip of clay. Try to make the spiral evenly, so give the strip the same wideness everywhere. It doesn't have to be perfect, because if it isn't, it will give a more playful result in the end. I make the spiral as big as I can and only take a little bit of clay away from the sides. Then I take the clay off the plank, so that it isn't stuck and I can easily lift it when making the tree. Then I grab the paper mold and I start twisting the clay around it. The beginning is the hardest because the clay might fall off, but when you have made the first round, the clay gets stuck to itself and it's easy to twist the clay all over the tree. As you can see, I overlap the clay at the bottom of the strip. And I do this all the way to the top. I unfortunately didn't have enough clay at the top. I first cut off some paper at the top, otherwise the top would become very pointy and I didn't like that. And I grabbed a little piece of clay and attached this at the top where I didn't have enough clay. And I closed the tree at the top. Then the shape of the tree is finished. I like to go over the whole tree with a wet sponge. This way I smooth out all of the edges. Then the tree is finished and you can just let it dry. I speed up the drying process by using my heat gun. I do this so I can immediately take the paper out of it. You shouldn't leave the paper in the form for too long. When the clay dries it shrinks, and when the paper is in the way it is possible that the clay cracks. So I recommend taking it out when the tree is strong enough to stand on its own. If you don't have a heat gun, I would recommend to let it dry for a day. I take the paper roll out by rolling it up a bit more and then just pull it out. And then the tree is finished and ready to dry before Bisque fire. I will now show you a variation on this tree which works almost the same. I again start off with some rolled out clay and I cut this into a spiral. Then I pick up the whole spiral and place it around the cone. I will be working from the top to the bottom, this way the overlap will be on the top part of the strip and will give a different effect. I first place the clay around the piece and then I bring it into the right place by putting it tighter around the paper. It might seem a bit messy, which it is, but this gives a nice effect in the end. And I also didn't smooth out this tree. This gives a bit more of a rough effect and can turn out quite nicely. At the end I pressed the clay onto the paper a bit more, to make sure it got stuck. Otherwise this would happen while going over it with a sponge. And then this tree is finished as well. To challenge you, I have a more difficult variation on this tree. It's quite difficult because it's very fragile. I start off the same, with making a spiral, but I'm making it quite thin this time. I grab the whole spiral and I start at the top of the paper cone. You can press the clay into the paper at the top. This will make it easier to twist the clay around the tree without falling off. And as you can see, I make a spiral around the tree in the same way as earlier. But because the clay is very thin, it's very fragile and it might not survive. I didn't have enough clay to go all the way to the bottom of the cone, but this isn't a problem, the tree will just become a bit smaller. Then I go over the whole piece with a sponge again to smooth out the edges. And then I use my heat gun again to dry it. When the clay is so thin, you should be very careful with this because it dries very fast and it can break very easily if you don't dry it evenly. Then I tried to take it off the paper, but I felt that the clay wasn't strong enough to stand on its own, so I put it back on the paper and let it dry for the night. The next day it was dry and it was strong enough to stand. I will now show you how I glaze the trees. I do this after they've been biscuit fired. I start off with applying 3 coats of the Glaze Blue Midnight from Emco on the first tree. It's important to let the glaze dry in between coats. I speed this up by using my heat gun. After brushing on the 3 coats of Blue Midnight, I start applying the Glaze Lustrous Jade. I'm applying this with a smaller brush, because I only apply it on the top part of the strips. I apply 2 coats. And this is what the tree looks like after it has been fired. For the next tree I'm only using one glaze. It's the glaze Satin Oribe, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm applying 3 even coats all over the tree. And again I let the glaze dry in between coats. And this is what the tree looks like after the glaze fire. I'm glazing the outside of the last tree with the glaze Tourmaline. But unfortunately this tree did not survive. As you can see, the tree is already a bit more tilted than when I made it. This happened during the biscuit fire. But I fire my pieces on a stoneware temperature, so the glaze fire will be a lot warmer and I already expected it to collapse even more. And unfortunately it did. To prevent it from falling on top of another piece, I put a kiln cylinder in the middle, but it didn't save it. So if you're going to make this tree, I would recommend to fire it at a lower temperature, because as you saw it can survive a biscuit fire from 1020 degrees Celsius. Here are some pictures of some trees that I made with the same technique and that I glaze fired at a lower temperature. That was it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked it and you learned something new from it. If so, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet. And if you're going to make these trees yourself or you're going to post them on Instagram, please tag me at Calder so I can see your work. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!